The People's Business is made possible by our partners, Solar Dynamics, the most efficient energy systems.
A very good night to you and welcome to this edition of The People's Business. I'm your presenter, Ryan Broom. Now, in tonight's edition, we look at the Day of National Significance. Now, the period between April 14th and August 23rd is known as in Barbados as a season of emancipation. For over 3 months, Barbadians commemorate the events leading up to the emancipation of slaves and eventually to the country's independence. Now, these commemorations include the Day of National Significance, which is observed on July 26th, tomorrow. Now, the occasion is used to commemorate the labor riots of 1937, which were part of the British West Indian labor unrest of 1934 to 1937. The unrest here in Barbados gave rise to the emergence of the first political parties and trade unions, among other things. And joining us to delve into this topic tonight is His Excellency David Comissong, Barbados' ambassador to Caricom, His Excellency Sergio Pastrana, Cuba's ambassador to Barbados, Dr. Rodney Worrell, lecturer in history at the University of the West Indies. And we'll explore the Day of National Significance when we come back right after this break. Welcome back, and we get the discussion going now. I'm going to start with Ambassador Comissong and ask you, sir, why is it important for us to commemorate the season of emancipation and in particular the Day of National Significance?
Thank you, Ryan. Well, the season of emancipation basically symbolizes what our whole historical journey has been here in Barbados. Remember, Barbados was the first out-and-out slave society in human history. It was the first society that was built completely on the basis of human slavery. And so from the very start of the then British colony of Barbados, the whole logic of the lived experience of the masses, the majority of the Barbadian people, which were the black people, the people of African descent in Barbados, was about struggling for freedom. It was about trying to bring about their emancipation, to gain their freedom. So if we look at our whole history can be interpreted as a struggle for emancipation over several centuries. So it would make sense that, now that we have come into our own as an independent country, that we have a season of emancipation in which over this 3-month period, we look at, we commemorate and celebrate the important milestones in that emancipatory journey. And one of the important milestones is July 26. July 26, 1937, Clement Payne was deported from Barbados, and when the oppressed masses of Barbados learnt of his deportation and the injustice and duplicity with which it had been accomplished by the colonial authorities, they exploded. And basically what that rebellion did, that rebellion that started on the 26th of July, it kick-started the stalled social revolution of Barbados. When slavery was abolished in 1838, that was the start of a very important social revolution for the masses, in fact for the whole society. But it had become stalled. It had become stalled for close to 100 years, and the incidents of that began on the 26th with that rebellion kick-started that social revolution once again, and led ultimately to the independence of Barbados, and led also, or is leading also to the attainment of the Republic of Barbados when Barbados fully consolidates its independence and nationhood.
Okay, I want to bring in Dr. Worrell now as well to weigh on this. Dr. Worrell, I want to get your views as well. Why is it important to commemorate the season of emancipation, and in particular the National Day of Significance?
Well, it is vitally important that we remember these occasions because the struggle during the period of enslavement on these death camps inside of this Barbados was for the dignity of Barbadians, the dignity of black people to be human beings, because during the period of enslavement, it was said that we were less than human beings, and if we were not less than human beings, we certainly were treated as less than a white person. So we have to think about the martyrs that give their lives trying to win freedom from enslavement. So this is a period of reflection. Is it a period of remembering where we come from, and also thinking about the struggle in the future. So that is part of the season of emancipation. But the day of national significance, we look at that day in particular because a band of working class men and women who fought for our dignity, they fought for better wages, they fought for social and economic and political enfranchisement, because the first 100 years, and if we take 1937 to be representative of 100 years after legal emancipation, this was a period of racial apartheid in Barbados. The period of the 1920s and the 1930s was a period of hopelessness. It was a period of wretchedness. It was a period of racism. I don't like to use terminologies like this, but this was a period of some of the darkest moments of our existence inside of the 20th century. So we must celebrate these occasions by paying homage to persons like the Right Excellent Clement Payne, people like Lovell, and the 29 persons that died as a result of the rebellion of 37, but also the people that labor the Garvey's in the 1920s and the 1930s, and the Working Men's Association that took up these labor matters. And in particular, we also have to mention Dr. Charles, the Right Excellent Dr. Charles Duncan O'Neill as well. So yeah, nations must embrace these occasions. Nations must celebrate these occasions. Nations must let their children and young generations be exposed to the ideas that motivated these individuals. So this is why it is imperative as a nation, and David did mention about going to a republic. But Moses Small, or Frederick Small, a member of the Working Men's Association in 1934, said, "Fancy we say we free, but our head of state is still a king." And I'm saying that fancy we say that we are independent, and our head of state is still a queen. So we now understand why it's imperative that we do go the next step. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Worrell. I actually want to come back to that issue of young people in relation to this topic, but first let me just say good evening again to Ambassador Pastrana, and Cuba also celebrates the National Day of Significance. What does this mean for the Cuban people?
Thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you to the People's Business for inviting us tonight to share with the Barbadian these ideas and these concepts. It is a pleasure to share with you and to come into your houses to tell you about how connected all of this is. And if we go back in history, the two most wide established plantation economies based on sugar by the British and the Spaniards were Barbados and Cuba. As early as 1804, Alexander von Humboldt described the plantation economy and the abuse of slavery as something that could not stand for long in a political study of the island of Cuba that was published in the first part of the 19th century in Europe. And yes, the 100 years that came from emancipation to these riots of the 30s that were all over the Caribbean. So the same plantation economy that was based on slavery turned into these partly salaried workers that were taken into join the economy only for periods of time, and why discontent? Because the wide masses were exploited, and there was no future, as you, Dr. Worrell, very clearly explained. But what happened in Cuba was that right some 15 years after that, there was a coup d'etat, and the military took over after all those unrests that, since you were describing, were here running from the 30s. In the 40s, the Cubans were able, in the early 40s, to establish a new constitution, but the economy of the island continued to be the same. So the constitution was a void paper. And the leaders of the workers started again this revolt, but those were crushed by a military coup d'etat. And a group of young people on that date precisely assaulted the Moncada barracks, which was the second most important military fortress of the forces that had played on that coup d'etat. And this, of course, provided the small flame that inflamed the whole of the Cuban population, and from 53 to 59, in merely 6 years, the revolution triumphed. So this is a day of significance both for Barbados and Cuba. We share our history, and we share our heroes, and we share those events that mark the paths after emancipation to independence, which is something that came for both of us much later. Thank you.
Going to go back to you, Ambassador Comissong. Given all that you have said tonight, what therefore should be the central messages, the themes that we should associate really with this commemoration of the National Day of Significance?
Well, first of all, let me say that we are very pleased to have the Cuban ambassador with us on this program, because it is so striking that the 26th of July is Barbados's Day of National Significance. And also in Cuba, the 26th of July is a big national holiday. It is their day of the revolution. And if the ambassador didn't make it absolutely plain, it was on the 26th of July, 1953, that Fidel Castro started the modern phase of the Cuban Revolution, when these young men attacked that Moncada barracks on the 26th of July. So this is, a very big day in Cuba. It's a public holiday, and just like us. So tomorrow, we Barbadians, we will be having a ceremony from Jubilee Gardens. Really and truly, the real name of Jubilee Gardens is the Lower Green. We usually have this ceremony at Golden Square, but as we may know, Golden Square is in a period of construction. We are creating this beautiful Golden Square Freedom Park, and because of the construction there, we decided to shift the celebration to Jubilee Gardens. Now, back in 1937, there were three places that were regarded as the stomping grounds of Clement Payne, where he held his most important mass meetings. And they were Golden Square, Carrington Village, and the Lower Green. So by going to the Lower Green tomorrow, and unfortunately, because it's COVID-19, we can only accommodate 100 people there physically in the audience, but it will be live streamed, including by CBC, and I believe the ceremony will also be live on CBC television tomorrow. So this commemorative ceremony is something that Barbados has invested in for decades now. And it is certainly something that I personally and the Clement Payne movement that we established in 1988, we have invested in. I mean, we took it upon ourselves every year to make sure this day was celebrated, because what we were doing in celebrating this day was calling Barbadians to pay attention to one of the brightest moments in the history of this country, when ordinary Barbadian men and women said, enough is enough. We are taking the destiny of our country into our own hands. We are resolved that Barbados has to be transformed. This social revolution that has been stuck so long has to go forward again. And even if it meant that some of them had to pay the greatest price, so be it. You know, there were the martyrs, they are the heroes, and you know, I feel so strongly about the importance of this day, about the importance of Barbadians remembering and paying honor and respect, not only to the martyrs who died at the hands of you know, really criminal violence by the colonial police, but also all of the heroes. I produced this booklet to commemorate the day tomorrow. It's called the Clement Payne Story, and it ends by listing the heroes of 1937: the Right Excellent Clement Osborne Payne, Israel Daniel Lovell, Ulrich Grant, Darnley Brains Aline, Fitzgerald Menzies Chase, Morty Mesquite, Eunice or Eunice Belgrave. These are names that we Barbadians must always remember and honor.
Thank you. I'm going to let you go back to that book, and I also want to touch on the issue of if enough is being done to do that. But I'll be right back after this break with more of the discussion. Now, before we continue with the discussion, you would have heard the ambassador mention just now Golden Square and the work that's going on there. And Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley would have recently spoken on that, actually, that what's happening there and the significance of the work that's being done at Golden Square.
The day of national significance on Monday, the 26th of July, which marks the commemoration of the 1937 riots, will be held in Jubilee Gardens this year. David Comissong of the Clement Payne movement lamented the fact that the celebrations cannot take place in Golden Square Freedom Park. He told CBC that Mother Nature and COVID-19 interrupted construction. However, he is hopeful that the work will be completed shortly because the space offers endless opportunities.
We will have a 2-acre green area in the heart of Bridgetown. In that area, we will have a bronze bust of the Right Excellent Clement Payne. We will also have a number of educational aspects of the Freedom Square. And it will also be a center for artistic performances, for public meetings, for public lectures.
The Pan-Africanists praised the work which the Barbados Tourism Investment Inc. is doing, increasing the green space in the heart of the city. He says it not only fits in with Bridgetown's historic designation, but he suggested that it would be a wonderful environment to celebrate our independence as a republic.
By the 30th of November this year, the day on which we are going to herald in the new Republic of Barbados, that Golden Square Freedom Park would have been totally completed, and that therefore the official opening and launching of the entire Freedom Park in all of its glory could be part of those historic Republic celebrations.
The park is also being viewed as a prime tourism attraction where visitors will have ready access to the history of Barbados. Wendy Burke, CBC News.
Now that, of course, was the update on what's happening with the park, because as I said, Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley had also weighed in on this issue in relation to Golden Square Park.
I have come today to say to you that it is our determination that as we continue to build out this country, as we continue to raise a proud people, that we come to recognize that people must know the details of their story. On this large tower that stands right to the side, to the left of me, we shall have digital screens that will continue to tell the story of what made this moment and how Barbados has been forged by Barbadians when they were given the opportunity to claim their own destiny. It is from this square as well that we shall have a monument that captures the names of all persons who lived in this land, and then a separate monument to pay tribute to those whose last names we shall never know, because they have gone to a place that we don't know, but we know the contribution that they have made in the building of this fair land. It is from this location as well, we shall always remember that the example of excellence that has been given to us by those who were not satisfied to just be a person who also ran, but that we instill in our people the commitment to reach to global standards. I need not remind us of the example of the great Sergio Sobers, our Right Excellent Sergio Sobers, our national hero. I need not remind us that as he grew up on one side of Bridgetown, to show the world that he could be the greatest cricketer that ever lived. On the other side of Bridgetown, Rihanna was born and also grew up to show that she too could grasp opportunity and become the greatest of her generation with respect to building the kind of empire to change lives and to bring the all-inclusive spirit that is so dear to the Barbadian DNA.
Where's there Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley? Now, Dr. Worrell, I want to bring you in here. Do you think that, based on some of the things the Prime Minister mentioned, telling the story and making this thing impact more, do you think that enough is being done to mark the occasion and the significance of a day of national significance for the wider populace? Do you think that they understand the significance?
I don't think that sufficient is being done. You know, and I don't want to be overly critical. However, every year, sometimes it seems like one step forward and two steps backward. But we have recognized that the Prime Minister, we're getting some attention at the highest level. And we hope that this will trickle down into the wider society. So, yeah, I want to be optimistic and see the positives of this kind of development. Hopefully, the new square will also foster a greater interest in terms of the Day of National Significance. And I must compliment David for his work over the years. And I will also say tomorrow there's going to be a small ceremony at St. George Parish Church around the grave of Israel Lovell, put on by Paco at 11 o'clock. But I think our young people now, and I'm going to get to the heart of your question. I think our young people need to know the story about 1937. And they need to know the story about the heroes of the period. But they also need to know the story about the conditions that existed in the 1920s and the 1930s. And they also must be aware that this was a pan-Caribbean or a set of pan-Caribbean labor rebellions taking place. So if you're telling Caribbean people about that they are similar and the need for Caribbean integration as well, this is a good starting point to let them see that we had labor rebellions in Belize, we had labor rebellions in St. Kitts, we had labor rebellions in Trinidad, we had labor rebellions in St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Jamaica, etc., etc. And we also want to let our young people know that we are also connected with the wider pan world, because what took place in 1937 was also influenced by developments taking place in Ethiopia, right? So I mean, sometimes and these developments impacted on the Caribbean as well, and impacted on Barbados. And so we need to tell the totality of the story to allow our young people, our students, see that this event was not some fly-by-night. And this is why I don't call it any riot, because yeah, I think it is richer and it is deeper, and they responding to the objective and the subjective conditions of 37. Right? So if our young people are fully aware of what transpired, they would recognize that we are very similar to our Caribbean neighbors, and also there is a Pan-African dimension, or there still is, and there was a Pan-African dimension to the 1937 disturbances as well. And also, to speak about the Caribbean dimension, it's the Garveyite influence as well, because Clement Payne was a Garveyite. Israel Lovell, he was a Garveyite. Albert Grant, he was a Garveyite. And when we look across the labor movement across the region, we see that these movements were led by Garveyites. Duncan O'Neill, he was a Garveyite. So we need to, and once the young people are aware, then we will get more buy-in, and hopefully the consciousness will percolate through the society.
Okay, Ambassador Comissong, I want to bring you in here because you were mentioning the book that you produced. Getting the message through to the young people is sometimes a challenge, especially in terms of attention span. We know how technology is these days. Already, Prime Minister referred to the fact that they'll be using digital technology at the Golden Square to tell the story. Tell me a little bit about that side.
Yeah, well, we have to do a better job of giving our young people their history, and in particular giving them the high points of that history, the high points where they can see our people behaving with courage and nobility and a sense of duty, giving them their heroes. And so I made the effort to produce this, I was hoping that it would coincide with the actual opening of the new Freedom Park. But this contains Clement Payne's own, in his own words. Clement Payne, after he was deported, the dad, um, and Barbadian people need to be aware. Clement Payne happened to be born in Trinidad to Barbadian parents, but he came to Barbados at the age of 4. He went to school at Bay Street Boys School and Wesley Hall, and he only went back to Trinidad at the age of 23. So he's really socialized in Barbados. But after they deported him to Trinidad, he wrote a small booklet called My Political Memoirs of Barbados. So this booklet reproduces his political memoirs. And when he was given his speeches in places like Golden Square, the police were constantly following him, and police spies would take down everything that he said when he spoke. And so we were able to get notes from the CID files to reproduce one of the speeches of Clement Payne. So I think this is a very important booklet that shares a lot of very important information. I have it in an e format as well, and I will try to get it into all of the schools and get it to circulate as widely as possible. But and this is so important, Ryan, that our people must understand. Barbados, as small as we are, Barbados is a very important leader of the developing world, just like Cuba. And you know, both of these Caribbean countries that celebrate the 26th of July as their revolutionary day. We are both, in different respects, but important leaders of the developing world. I would say Barbados is a very important leader of the category of small island developing states within the broad ambit of the developing world or the third world. Cuba is a very important leader of the middle size and middle rank countries of the developing world. China, for example, would be perhaps the leader of the large and powerful developing world countries. But we are all important leaders in our own right. And it is therefore so important that as a leader, we have to consolidate our nationhood. We cannot really carry out that leadership role properly with a British Queen as our head of state.
I'm going to let you develop that.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to let you develop that for, but you have to stick up in there just for now. We're going to be right back after this break with your calls as well. Remember, you can call us at 228-5562, 228-5563. We'll be back right after this break. Welcome back to the People's Business Live, where the topic tonight, the Day of National Significance. And before we went to break, Ambassador Comissong was speaking about leadership in the context of what we're discussing here tonight. Before I do that, again, you can join us with your calls and comments or questions, 228-5562, 228-5563. Ambassador?
No, I just really wanted to cement that relationship between Barbados and Cuba, because it's just so striking that these two Caribbean countries should actually share the 26th of July as their day of revolution, their day of national revolutionary significance. And when you really pierce beneath the surface, you really look at it, these two countries are very important leaders of the developing world. And I think, I believe that the two countries share a lot in common. Like Ambassador Pastrana, I think part of it has to do with our history as fully developed sugar plantation economies. You know, it really started with Barbados. Then Barbados passed the baton on to Jamaica, the fully developed sugar plantation economy. That was then passed on to Haiti and then on to Cuba in the 19th century. And so that kind of experience created a kind of what I would call a proto-proletariat among the working class of Barbados, of Cuba. And with that proto-proletariat came a certain capacity. But what makes these two countries so similar, and why I say they are leaders of the third world in different capacities, but leaders nonetheless, is that we both have a similar notion of the valuableness of every member of our society. In both countries, in both Barbados and Cuba, we have this notion that every child, for example, must be properly clothed, must have proper health care, must be going to school, must be taken proper care of. And I think we came to that in Barbados through our history, that social revolution coming from a large slave mass, struggling for freedom and struggling for upward mobility. And I think Cuba likewise, Cuba came to it, I think, through that revolution that Fidel Castro started on the 26th of July, 1953. So all of these lessons and elements are what we examine when we pause every 26th of July to reflect on this history.
Okay, thank you, sir. I then understand we have a call on the line. Good evening, caller. Go ahead with your call, with your comment or question.
Good evening, Mr. Comissong.
Good evening.
And to the panel. Now, I am a bit confused about a hero. And I would like you to explain to the public what is a hero. As far as I am concerned, the 1937 riots that took place in this country did not take place on the advice of Clement Payne, because Clement Payne's ideal principle was agitate and not violate. But at the same time, this 1937 riots was an act of violation, because the outstanding position in this debate brings me right back to what our Prime Minister said yesterday in a press conference, that if you falsify your documents on health, you would be charged. And if Clement Payne falsified his position as a Barbadian in his ignorance, not knowing that he was not born in Barbados, then the riot took place. Clement Payne was not on the lands of this country. It was a group of people. If you want to consider them as heroes, I could accept that. But he never agitated anything or violated anything. He was offshore when this violent act took place in 1937. And I think you all are misleading the public, making people believe that Clement Payne started anything in this country. It is not true. So I want.
Okay, let me explain to you, sir. Let me explain to you. Clement Payne, this Barbadian, because he was basically, he lived here until the age of 23, then he went to Trinidad for 10 years. He came back with a mission. He came back to Barbados with a mission. You would have heard Dr. Worrell tell you the condition of the oppressive condition of the Barbadian people back in 1937. Clement Payne had developed into a very potent activist in Trinidad, a member of the Marcus Garvey movement, a founder, one of the founders of the first trade unions in Trinidad, a leading member of the Negro Welfare Social and Cultural Association, one of the leading working class activist organizations of Trinidad and Tobago. So he came to Barbados as a leading activist precisely with the mission to organize the working class people of Barbados. He started holding these public meetings, and his message was that the working class needed to be organized, they needed to have their own political institutions in order to fight for their rights and fight for social upliftment. And Clement Payne was on the verge of establishing the Barbados Progressive Working Men's Association. In other words, he said, look, the people have accepted my message. This is what he actually said. These are his words. They are ready for this kind of political organization. And it was when he was on the verge, he, along with his lieutenants, Israel Lovell, Darnley Allen, Menzies Chase, all of these powerful working class activists, is when they were on the verge of launching the organization that the colonial police authorities moved against him. And so they came with that he gave this, when he entered Barbados, he had put down on his immigration form that he was born in Barbados. And they used that to prosecute him. And the Court of Appeal dismissed that, said, look, he came here at 4 years old. He might very well not have known that he had been born overseas. But the colonial authorities had decided it didn't matter whether the Court of Appeal acquitted him or not. They were deporting him from Barbados. And when the working class people who had come to recognize Clement Payne as their leader, he was going to be the man to lead them on their social revolution. When they recognized that he had been taken from them, their leader had been taken from them, they exploded. They exploded in righteous anger. And what that explosion did, yes, Clement Payne's message was not about violence. Clement Payne's message, he said, organize, educate, agitate, don't violate. But that explosion of anger, it sent a message to the colonial authorities. Either we have to reform this society from on top and give the people more liberty and more social advancement, or the working class people will take power into their own hands and revolutionize the society from the bottom. And that is where we got political parties, we got the Trade Union Act, we got labor commissioners. I mean, so many of the things we take for granted today, we only achieved because the people sent that serious message in 1937. That's why Clement Payne is a hero today.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Comissong. We have another caller on the line. I want to get back to that, Ambassador Pastrana, but we have another caller on the line. We'll go to that caller. Good evening, caller. Go ahead with your comment or your question.
Yes, good night. You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, listen, I want to ask the historians and the people on the panel if they really believe that young people in Barbados are interested in the history of this country. I want to ask them deeply if there goes about talk to people, talk to young people and hear what they have to say. If they believe that young people are solely worried about the history of this party, this country. And I want to say, in my view, I've spoken to historians, in my view, and there's a lot of distortion of history in Barbados. That's one of the problems too by historians, and I want to blame them. A lot of very distorted facts, the real facts of Barbados. I'm a man of full age, and you can't tell me anything. I grew up in town, I live in town, and I know the history of this country. Well, a lot of historians distort the facts of this country, and that's one of the problems. Young people don't want to hear anything about the history of Barbados. Please tell that. I met young people, most young people in Barbados don't want the history of Barbados. Young people in Barbados want to get on, get some money, and live. You understand? And that's the problem. I gone.
Dr. Worrell, you are a lecturer, sir. Is that necessarily true? I mean, it is true that there is some that for some young people, but is that necessarily true? Are young people so disillusioned with history, with our history?
Well, and firstly, they must be taught their history. And what we recognize is that very few young people in Barbados are taught history, because history is not done by a large segment of school children, right? Social studies is the preferred option. So I think when we get back, and I saw proposals, plans to bring back history in the schools, then we can have this conversation. But if students are not taught history, why I don't think they would be interested in history. It's only when they're being taught the history and how the history will be, that they will generate some interest in the subject matter. I don't know because I live in a particular parish or particular space that I know all of the history. Because I know that as a historian that you read widely, you consult. For the last 14 years, I've been working on a book, and I'm constantly, like David said, reading the reports of what the detectives had to say about what the workers' men's or what the UNIA was doing, and consult every available thing that was written. So I don't know if I read one thing or if I live in a particular place, if that would make me an authority on any of the subject matter. So this thing about I have a historian friend, Professor Haki Adi, and he always warned me that the thing is that everybody think that they are a historian. So we will see.
Okay, Ambassador Pastrana, I actually want you to weigh in on this for the young people from on Cuba's side, if they're paying interest to the history. But we have to go to break, and we'll talk about that. I'm going to let you do that right after we come back from this break. Welcome back to the People's Business Live, and we're going to go back the discussion, of course, the Day of National Significance. I'm going to go to Ambassador Pastrana to Cuba, the Cuban ambassador. And what's happening in terms of Cuba? We heard that caller just now talk about suggesting that young people are not interested in history. Is that your experience in terms of history on the Cuban side? Is there an interest in history and this type of history that we're talking about here tonight, the Day of National Significance?
Thank you so much, Ryan. Well, let me first comment on what has been said by both Dr. Worrell and Ambassador Comissong. It is so important to understand that these events that we are trying to celebrate and we are trying to commemorate are part of a chain of events that is part of the evolution of global history, and that the Caribbean had a strong influence in the evolution of countries all over the world, but mostly in Europe, Africa, during many centuries. And we have to understand, and going back to your question, there is an old saying that says that people that do not know their history are condemned to live it again, and are condemned to live their own mistakes again. So that is the importance of education in history. I would say that no matter how much you educate and publicize the history of each nation, there is a constant barrage of information daily now within the whole spectrum of both mass media and social media, that it is most important to strengthen the basis of learning for the history of each of our countries. Though you intensely do, and you must continue to do, you're fighting with a lot of distraction, a lot of information that is destined to quit thinking. It's just to entertain. So entertainment must be taken together with education and learning, because information will not be knowledge unless you are educated with it. Information to distract, information to entertain, will not totally educate you. So the important thing here is to remind us that in societies that have been built around the family and around the strengthening of the social links of our nations, we must continue educating constantly about the highlights of history that has provided us with an identity. And let me then come to my last comment in this sense. If you go and analyze the Cuban or the Bajan society, you will find that both are culturally distinct. And in both, being born in the Caribbean of countries made up of immigrants, mostly taken here to build an empire of exploitation, we have been able to create cultures that are strong, that have a strong message in music, in dancing, in the way we sing, you name it, in pictorial arts. We are very much significant for the world in terms of the culture that we have been able to build. And these societies that have built that culture must learn their history because they were influencing world evolution, world development. The Cuban music, the Bajan music, both influence the world musical stage. We have persons that were born here who are great artists known all over the world, great thinkers that are known all over the world. We have impacted the world, and now in the midst of all that we are living with the pandemic, if you go to numbers and statistics and the way we have been facing this, what is a real world scourge, and you see the results of what we have been able to achieve, you will learn that our island countries of the Caribbean are able to teach a lesson to the wide world and to the big countries in dealing with this pandemic through cooperation, through solidarity, through strengthening our links. So I would say that it is important that we teach our young people and that we make them understand where they come from, what are the bases of their history, what are the bases of the society in which they live, so that they become empowered by this history to be able to continue our path towards development. I think that we are both countries in the line of the attack of global environmental change, and we are in the midst of the world crisis as it is, economic crisis as it is, impacted by COVID. We have learned how to deal with COVID, and we have come out of it, or we're coming out of it in a good shape. We have been able to face it squarely and work towards giving our hope for a better solution of this challenge. We will do it with economy eventually, but we will need to do it against global change as well. And this is another lesson that we can teach the world, how small developing islands can deal with this problem they have put us in, because most of the damage to the environment has come from big enterprises in big countries and we're not our fault, though we are the first that are suffering the consequences, the small island developing states. So I would say that this is the importance of teaching our children about the history of our countries, so that they come to understand that this is what builds our identity as Bajans, as Cubans, as Caribbean nations that are building a new type of culture and development.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. I believe we have another call on the line. Good night, caller. Go ahead with your comment or question. Good night, caller. Go ahead with your comment or question. Good night. All right. Okay. Oh. Okay, well, before we get to that caller, then I will allow Ambassador Comissong to respond to this same topic that we're looking at here, what the other last caller talked about in terms of, are we educating or are young people really interested in our history? Just get you to beyond that, sir.
Ryan, it is so important. I mean, I am bursting to give our young people their history, because if our young people get their true history as Barbadians, they will get a sense of their tremendous capacity. I'll give you one example, Ryan. At the recent Caricom heads of government meeting, this notion of the OECD imposing this global corporate tax, seeking to impose this global minimum corporate tax all around the world, seeking to determine for the whole world that we must all have this tax rate. And Prime Minister Motley was able to say to her fellow heads of government, she said, look, we in Barbados understood since 1652 that there is to be no taxation without representation. We understood this more than 100 years before the American Revolution, which was fought on that principle, no taxation without representation. Why was she able to have this insight? Because she knew the history. In 1652, Barbados basically declared independence of the Commonwealth of Britain, Cromwell's Commonwealth, and they actually fought a war that, and when the peace was negotiated, one of the principles that the Barbadian colonists of that era insisted upon with the British, that the British had to agree to, is that Britain cannot tax Barbados. The British Parliament cannot impose taxes on Barbados because we are not represented in their parliament. If we knew our history, we would know that the beginnings of the British and European Industrial Revolution took place right here in Barbados in the 1640s. There were no factories in Britain in the 1640s. The beginnings of the Industrial Revolution are on the sugar plantations with the windmill to grind the sugar, to produce the sugarcane juice, and the boiling house or the sugar factory take that cane juice through various chemical and boiling processes to produce sugar. And that enterprise was run by enslaved Africans. And that whole British and European industrial civilization, that is where it started. That's where the profits were initially generated. That's our history. Our young people need to know that. They need to know that in 1865, a 12-year-old Barbadian boy made a journey on a ship called the Cora to the west coast of Africa, and that 12-year-old boy grew up to become President Arthur Barclay of Liberia. You know, they need to know about Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford, who was the Marcus Garvey's musical director and perhaps the second most important leader of the Marcus Garvey movement. And I can go on and on, Brian. So it is so important that we give our young people their history, give them a sense of what their forefathers and foremothers have accomplished in the past, give them a sense of their own inherent capacity as Barbadians. And that is why it is so critical. And it's so critical that we embrace all of these milestones, all of these historical milestones, like July 26, like Emancipation Day, like the anniversary of the Bussa Rebellion, 14th of April. We embrace all of these milestones to pause, to come together as a people, to educate ourselves about the milestone and the history behind it, and to develop that sense of who we are and what our capacity is as a people and as a nation.
And where do you think that does it just begin and end in a typical educational process, or does the parent, the average mother, average father, have a role to play in sharing that history
No,
as
no.
well?
The schools, the newspapers, the radio stations, the television station. I mean, I honestly do not think we do enough. I think this is what Rodney Worrell was saying. I don't think he was saying that there was anything wrong with the Golden Square Freedom Park. I mean, that's a wonderful project. But generally speaking, we do not do enough. Our media outlets don't do enough to share that Barbadiana, whether it is in history, it is in our music, it is in our literature, our poetry, you know, our Kamau Braffits, our George Lammings, our Paul Marshalls, our Tom Clarks, our Jackie Opels. There's so much about us that is so fantastic, but we quite often neglect it. We don't promote it. We don't share it. We don't root our young people in it. And the Ambassador Pastrana was trying to tell us we're now living in a world where there's so many forces out there, just that people that have their own agendas that would just like to sweep us away, sweep our young people away, and we have to root our young people. And the only way to root your young people is to give them a sense of their history, give them a sense that they possess a unique heritage that belongs to them, and that is special and unique to them. So all of us have to embark upon. We have to do a lot more, and we have to do a lot more precisely because the challenges out there, the cultural penetration is so intense now with all the social media. And finally,
Okay.
finally, Ryan, let me say this. Because this is important.
Really quickly, really quickly.
I have been able to see that Barbados is, whether Barbadians understand it or not, in terms of Caribbean leadership, Barbados is important. In terms of wider Pan-African and third world and developing world leadership, Barbados is important. And if we are to truly play that role that so many people in the international arena are expecting Barbados to play, it is important that we have a good sense of our identity. And that's why I am so impressed with the fact that we are going to become a republic, because if we are to play that leadership role internationally, when people look at us, they must see a nation that has fully consolidated its own nationhood.
Okay, sir.
It is
We're
not
gonna
going
stop
down.
in there. We're gonna,
Okay.
I'm gonna let you elaborate on that actually on the Republic issue when we come back from this break. Welcome back to the People's Business Live, where the topic is the Day of National Significance. I understand we have a call on the line. Caller, go ahead with your comment or question.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, Ryan, and
Hi.
good evening to your panel. Yeah, firstly, I would like to commend and compliment Ambassador Comissong for his tireless effort in attempting to raise the level of consciousness of Barbadians. You know, his efforts to advance the level of social and psychological development of our people. Right? In a way, I think he is a hero. You know, and I'm all for having a day, in fact, days of national significance, and as he himself said, highlighting positive aspects of our history and so on. But there's something I want to focus on, looking at the negative aspects of our history, because I'm a firm believer in self-critique and indeed in self-criticism. And I draw inspiration from the biblical story where when the Jews were in captivity in Babylon, when they looked towards Solomon's temple and prayed, the first thing they said is that we have sinned. They accepted that their actions had contributed to their own demise and put them in the position where the enemy could actually take advantage of them. I was traveling across the Constitution Bridge recently, and I heard a little group up there, the 12 tribes of Israel, and one of the presenters said something that I find really remarkable. He said, we must condemn and criticize the white people for what they did to us, but we must criticize ourselves first. We need to be prepared to look at ourselves and find out where we have and where we still continue to contribute to our demise and take the necessary corrective action. I want to finish by posing one question to Ambassador Comissong, please. You know, on several occasions we've heard Dr. Beckles speak of what he referred to as intergenerational trauma and the lingering legacy of psychological damage and so on with black people, you know. I want to ask Ambassador Comissong, does he think that this apparent obsession that African women have with rejecting their own hair and wearing the hair harvested from other ethnic groups is a serious indication of that sort of psychological trauma? Thank you. Good evening.
Ryan, my response to that is that, look, all people who undergo serious trauma, serious traumatic incidents are impacted by it. So yes, black people, African people in Barbados, our history has been a traumatic history. We have been impacted by it, but and the Europeans. But in terms of negative impacts, we have managed that trauma better than many other people, including the Europeans. And why do I say that? I say that because our ancestors were brought here in the most brutal, evil, and barbaric society, all kinds of oppressions. And we resisted that oppression. We were deposited in locations of barbarism, and we humanized these locations of barbarism. We made them what they are today. Barbados is a humane, caring, nurturing society. At one point, Barbados went to number 19 on the United Nations list of human development in terms of countries, the ratings of their human development. That is how they care for people, how they educate people and give them health care, etc. So we have done well. The black people of Barbados have done extremely well to humanize the society. We have never become bitter. We have never become a people of bitterness. But yes, we, like all other people, there is some post-traumatic damage, and some of that can be seen in some of the things that the caller described. Some of us who shy away from our African phenotype and our hair. So that is some of the damage that we have to correct. But we will be making a big mistake if we characterize ourselves as somehow some severely damaged people, because that is not true. Okay. We have managed better than most to withstand a brutish past and yet to preserve our intrinsic humanity and to go on to humanize our society.
Okay, and then Stan, we have another call on the line. Good night, caller. Please go ahead with your comment or question.
Good night to the panel. I want to say that I commend the gentleman for giving us some insight on the history of Barbados, and especially the 1937 riot, which we all hold dearly. My problem is, I think that when adult Barbadians come to mislead and to politicize the history of the country and to blame young people on what really is the facts that have been done and what would actually give young people some root into how to go forward as a people, because they would recognize, as the panel is saying, how far we have come as a people and how civilized we have been throughout all the torment and the persecution that we have been through, and how well we have stand up in the world, and as leaders in every area. I think that adults should never try to distract or block people, young people especially, from knowing their history and from being able to stand up for what they know is right. That's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you, caller. All right. Ambassador, is another caller on the line?
The line here.
Good night. Go ahead, caller, with your comment or question.
My question is directed to Comissong. It is dealing with the female heroes you spoke about. A name that was called that, you know, the whole thing about it is that, yeah, we want history, but we want to know the background. And I'm speaking about Eunice Belgrave. We need to know.
Yes, Mark. Very important. Eunice Belgrave was a wayside vendor. And when Clement Payne was arrested, Clement Payne went to Brantley Adams, who was perhaps the leading barrister of the day. And Clement Payne wanted to get his services as a lawyer to represent him. But Brantley Adams said, well, my fee is £10. Clement Payne did not have the money. Eunice Belgrave took it upon herself to go around Bridgetown collecting money, collecting pennies here and there to make up that £10 to be able to pay the lawyer's fee so that Clement Payne could have legal representation. And she succeeded. And Brantley Adams did represent him. Brantley Adams represented him at the Court of Appeal hearing where the conviction was thrown out. And Brantley Adams attempted to get the deportation order that had been made against Clement Payne. As Clement Payne's lawyer, he attempted to get the deportation order cancelled, but unfortunately was unable to do so. So Eunice Belgrave, who is really a heroine to the wayside vendors of Barbados, and I know this because they recently consulted me and on getting some historical information about her. I know they want to honor her, and her son still lives there in the Orleans. But yes, she is a stalwart, and Mark is so right. We tend to know a lot more about our male heroes, but there's a lot of work we have to do to unearth the genuine female heroes of Barbados. You know, I spoke about that 12-year-old boy who went to Liberia. Well, his mother, Sarah Ann born Barclay, the daughter of London born. I mean, she became a tremendous matriarch in Liberia. So some of these female heroes, there's still work to be done to bring them fully to the attention of the Barbadian people.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. I understand we have another caller on the line, but we're almost, we have to, okay, I believe we can go to break. When we come back, Ambassador, we're going to be wrapping up, but I want to know if you could talk a little bit about what we can do from a cultural standpoint in terms of monetizing perhaps some of our history, ways that we can look at cultural or historic tourism. But we'll do that right after the break. Welcome back to the People's Business Live. We're in the home stretch of this program. We were talking about the Day of National Significance. Just want to get back to Ambassador Comissong. Ambassador, we've had scenarios in the past where we've used history and culture from a tourism standpoint to make some money. And I'm wondering if that is something that we could do as one of the points of engagement with young people in terms of depictions of things as they would have happened back then. The NCF has also gotten in on that before in terms, to bring the tourist, to bring even the local person into more and better understanding through the plays and through the skits and so on, at the different locations. Is that something that can be used as one of the tools?
Definitely. Heritage tourism, community heritage tourism. There's so many aspects of it. For example, the Nigerians, you let them know that King Jaja of Opopo was exiled here in Barbados. I mean, King Jaja is their great folk hero. So there's so many aspects that we might not even be foremost in our minds. That's just one aspect that would appeal to our brothers and sisters in West Africa. Also, we need to understand, that Barbados was not a peripheral society. The story of Barbados is actually central to the story of the construction of the modern world. Barbados was not a backwater. Barbados is central to the whole story of the construction of the modern world. All those Barbados archives, you go to the Barbados archives. Right now, there's a project to digitize all of that because this is critical historical information, not just for Barbados, but anybody who wants to understand how modernity was developed, you have to consult the Barbados records. So Barbados has tremendous potential for heritage tourism and economic activities based on our history and our historical records.
And do you see the Golden Square perhaps coming into something like that as well, in terms of you have a new space where we could encourage tourists to frequent as well to learn some of our history?
The whole of Bridgetown, Ryan, when that's 2 acres. When that magnificent Freedom Park is developed, that is going to move. You're going to go from that into Independence Square, into the new Fairchild Street Village Market, into the work that is being done on the Constitution River, into Queen's Park. I mean, we have the potential. We have the potential to make the city of Bridgetown a shining, beautiful city of history, heritage, arts, and culture. So we just have to see the vision. We have to get the vision, and we have to pursue it. We have a lot that belongs to us that is extremely valuable. We just have to recognize that value and make full use of it.
Okay, I want to go back to Dr. Worrell now. Closing remarks, and I want to get your views on what more can be done. You are at the university level, but at the primary level, to get more of the history aspect into our education system, and to educate our students at that younger age. What do you think about that?
Okay, well, the Ministry of Education have a good plan, and they're thinking about introducing history in class 3 and 4, and that is something that I fully endorse. I look at the syllabus, so that I said, fantastic, because as I sought to explain tonight, there's a Barbadian history component. So if you go back and you look at the causes of the labor rebellions in Barbados, you see there's a Barbadian component, the leaders, some of the people involved. There's also a regional component, and there's also the international component, the Ethiopian question, as well as there was a crisis of capitalism at the time, which we call the Great Depression as well. So there were lessons there to how people handle the crisis before as well. So yeah, this is the path forward for the primary school. And if my last comment is to respond to the earlier caller who posed the question about a hero. And I think that any deep understanding of events that took place after the labor rebellion, the labor revolt, would show that this is why Clement Payne became a national hero. And we also have to look at the reasons he came here to organize. Payne was sent here on a mission, and he carried out the mission. And the fact that he was so successful was one of the reasons that the political establishment sought to remove him from the landscape. So it is not just that Payne told anybody to do anything, so he should not be a hero, but as a consequence of these events, we have trade unions, political parties, a labor department, and the list goes on and on. So the intervention by these heroes and sheroes brought a transformation in the conditions of Barbadian people in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And today we are the beneficiaries of the struggles of these individuals.
Okay. And quickly, do you think it's necessary to change the way how we teach history? You think that the way how we do it right now is good, or you think that we may have to look for more interactive ways when it comes to young people?
Yeah, I agree. But firstly, I want it to be in the schools because it is hardly taught inside the schools. We did some work with the sixth form, and we had in all of the sixth forms doing some sessions. Excellent. They're doing some good work in Nkrumah. They're doing some good work on reparations, etc. But not the numbers. So we had in all the sixth form schools, and the numbers might have been about 60 people. So that is very problematic. That is very troubling. And if we are dealing with questions of national identity and how we will navigate this post-COVID world, and how we would navigate all of the challenges coming from the imperialists, and how we are going to move into the Republican status, and how we're going to press for reparations, that is indeed troubling. And this is something that needs to be addressed and redressed as a sense of urgency. Because if we do this, then we will recognize that the Day of National Significance will really be a significant occasion in the lives of the people. And the Cuban ambassador, one thing that we have in common is our concern for the dignity of people. And between October and December 1975, when the Cuban people decided to go and help our brothers and sisters in Angola and South Africa, Prime Minister Barrow did allow the Cuban planes going to help the MPLA to refuel in Barbados. So this was a great step.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Ambassador Pastrana, I want to get your closing remarks, sir.
That's Ryan. Well, first of all, I would like to say that it is important that we continue to educate, but also that we continue to research our history and our way forward in development. And in that sense, I want to stress that there's been an institute jointly created by the University of the West Indies, UWI, and the University of Havana, that is the Institute for Sustainable Development, that will deal with these problems of the way our economies impact the world. And that goes from history to projects, economy, and like Dr. Worrell just said, how to deal with the world that is happening beyond COVID and beyond the challenges that we're facing today. And that is the important thing, that we continue educating, researching, studying, and producing knowledge that we can transmit to our children in a way that they understand their place in the world beyond mere distraction, beyond all the glitter that takes from learning who they are and what they are destined to. That is the important thing, to teach, to continue studying, to research, and to learn in order to be able to teach our children. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share with you all these ideas. And yes, we will commemorate our Day of National Significance both in Barbados and Cuba tomorrow within those ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ambassador Comissong, I leave it to you, sir, to your last closing remarks, sir.
Well, I would just like to wish all Barbadians and all Cubans a very meaningful Day of National Significance tomorrow. I I also want to tell Barbadians that in Clement Payne, we have a very special national hero, because this is one national hero that could actually be a national hero in two separate Caribbean territories. Because not only did he do heroic work in Barbados, but also in Trinidad and Tobago. He was a very outstanding leader of the working class movement in Trinidad and Tobago. So this is a special Barbados national hero. But tomorrow, 4:30, get to your relevant social media platforms. I'm pretty certain, I think CBC is bringing the ceremony live tomorrow. I will be taking part in that ceremony. Ambassador Pastrana, Prime Minister, Mayor Motley will give the feature address. Trevor Prescott, the mighty Gabby. I mean, it's going to be a very powerful 90-minute ceremony tomorrow. So I just want to end on that note, just to wish all Barbadians, all Cubans, a very meaningful day of national significance tomorrow, 26th of July.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Comissong, and thank you, Dr. Worrell, and thank you, Ambassador Pastrana. This has been The People's Business. Thank you also, callers, for your comments and your questions. The topic today, obviously, a day of national significance. It's tomorrow, and as Ambassador said, be sure to be a part of that ceremony at Jubilee Gardens at 4:30. I'm Ryan Broom. This has been The People's Business. Do have a good night.